Review Committee of the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District. It is to be held electronically using the WebEx conferencing service in accordance with Chapter 1283 of the 2020 Acts of Assembly in compliance with the provisions of the Code of Virginia, number 2.2-3708.2. So I hope that that is correct, Laura, because I'm reading that off of the agenda. Okay, so now I'm going to mute myself, and my name is Adria Bordas. I am the chair of the Technical Review Committee. I'm going to let everyone go around and introduce themselves first. That way we have a sense of who's on the line with us, and then we'll have Christina start with some of the things that we have on the agenda. Okay, go ahead. We'll just go around first. Laura? Why don't you introduce yourself and then we'll follow around.
Sounds good. Good morning. I'm Laura Grape. I'm Executive Director with Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District. So glad y'all are here. I'll bump to John Peterson. Let me take you off of mute, John.
I'm John Peterson. I'm a director and chairman of the board of directors of the district.
Chris, we're going to let you introduce yourself.
I'm Chris Kerner, elected director of the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District.
I'm Jerry Peters, vice chair of the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District.
Monica, would you like to go next?
Good morning, this is Monica Bilger, also director of the board of directors for the Soil and Water Conservation District.
And Dan?
I'm Dan Schwartz, soil scientist with the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District.
And Jim McGlone?
Yes, this is Jim McGlone, the Virginia Department of Forestry.
And Maria?
Hello, Maria Harwood, Urban Conservation Specialist with the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District.
And we've got Willie. Hold on, Willie.
Good morning, it's Willie Wood with the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District.
And let's see, we've got Charles Smith.
Yes, this is Charles Smith with the Stormwater Planning Division for the Department of Public Works and Environmental Services.
And Eric Caldwell. I'm going to take you off mute, Eric. There you go.
Eric Caldwell, Fairfax County Stormwater Maintenance.
Good morning. And Christina.
Christina Claren, Urban Conservation Specialist with the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District.
Great. Sorry, I'm fighting with you guys on the mute side of things. I appreciate your patience. All right, I think that is everybody. So, Adria, I'm going to mute myself again. Turn it over.
Okay. Thanks everybody for joining us. First, we're going to do a CAP application. Christina, you have the floor to talk about that.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the presentation. There we go. All right, so this month we just have one project for an HOA with the Conservation Assistance Program. And then we're also looking at 4 VCAP reimbursements. And then at the end, we're going to top everything off with some of the program changes and the final priority areas and ranking spreadsheet for all of our site visit request applications. So we're going to start with that one Conservation Assistance Program project. So this project is for the Hickory Vale Farms Association, located in the Great Falls area of Fairfax County. They are interested in doing a conservation landscaping with a variety of different trees and several different grasses in this area where there's currently a trail and some stormwater facilities that are intertwined with that trail in their HOA. Currently, this area is just mainly in turf, so there's not a lot of vegetation other than turf in this area, and it gets a lot of really great sunlight, so the HOA is interested in putting back some trees and grasses to just help take some of that area out of turf and provide an aesthetic portion to the trail that's commonly used. So this diagram below, you'll see that there's stormwater easement and resource protection area, and they've also gone ahead and done a numbered diagram to show where each of the species of trees and grasses will be going in this area. So some of it is outside of the stormwater easement and some of it is within it. So I'm actually interested to hear, particularly from Charles and Eric, if there's any concern with planting in these areas, because I did tell the homeowners association that we typically don't recommend planting in this area just because in the past we've had some issues with people not knowing who to go to in the county to get approval, one, to plant, and number two, to receive permission to go ahead and plant and get approval of the species. Just as a refresher, all of the projects through the Conservation Assistance Program are bound to a 10-year maintenance agreement, but that maintenance agreement is between the HOA and the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District. So I guess up top, these projects are voluntary, so they are not meant to help with maintenance of or required maintenance of a facility, and they're also not meant to correct any sort of violation with the county. So these are all voluntary projects, and the HOA is supposed to assume maintenance. So back to the plant list, you'll see here that they have about 7 areas that they're hoping to plant. You'll see the plant list with quantities here, and then the location symbols are numbered 1 through 7 right here on the right-hand side. So just looking at the map, you'll see a little bit of where they plan to plant some trees. So these are just some pictures to show what the current site conditions are, just to give you guys an example. So there are several trees in this area, but you'll see that it's largely turf. So the homeowners association, again, is interested in taking some of this area out of turf and putting in some more trees into this wide open space. And then these are just some other pictures to show just how, large this space in. They're looking at planting about between 3,000 and 4,000 square feet spread out over several areas. So it's not going to be, 3,000 square feet in one area. The approximate size is spread out over those 7 areas that we were just talking about. So in terms of the county side, this homeowners association has already been in contact with somebody with stormwater planning. They've had the plant list checked by urban forestry, and they've also applied for the RPA vegetation waiver to just replant trees in the areas of resource protection. So those are sort of the steps that the HOA has already taken from the county side to ensure that this project can go in to spec, but I am definitely interested in some thoughts from folks in other agencies. If there's anything that from the district side we should know about planting in these areas, and if there's anything I should bring back to the HOA regarding planting in these areas. So I can take some of that feedback now before we move on to the reimbursements for the month. Let me go back to the plant list and location so we can get a better look at them if needed.
Does anybody have any questions about the plants or the plantings?
Christina, this is Jim. What is the yellow line that runs through number 6?
Are you talking about this like outline right here? I don't know.
No,
Can you
no,
see
I'm
my
talking
mouse?
about this linear feature. Is that a pipe or a trail or?
I think it's just a channel.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
So the
presumably
trail,
that's just the approximate location of that tree.
yes, it's not in the
Okay.
channel. It's like kind of like off to the side.
And this is, I just wanted to clarify, this number 6 that is here, is that actually little blue stem grass that they're talking about planting in this entire area?
Yes, yes.
So that's not necessarily a tree right there.
Nope. So yeah, the little blue stem will just be going sort of around that channel, not within it, as to not block flow, should there be any.
And it looks like where the other number 6 is, actually, I'm just trying to, okay, so it's coming down this way. So the water is flowing north to south if you were, or up from the up area down. So trying, and then it flows out on the west side. Am I reading that right?
Mm-hmm.
So it comes in from east to west and north to south, and then flows out on the west side. So it doesn't appear as though they've got any trees necessarily on any dam structure. Maybe.
Yeah, I was just confused by the red polygon versus the red number 2.
I believe the red shaded area, the polygon area, means that area is within stormwater easement.
Okay.
And then number 2 is just representative of the planting location.
I'm a little concerned about sugar maple.
Okay. Just that it's not the right species for the right place type thing.
Well, yeah, it's not the right species for Fairfax County, basically.
Okay.
It's more of a northern species, and I know that a lot of them are having a lot of problems with gloomy scale, which I think is environmental stress that makes them more susceptible to it.
Okay. Good to know.
If they're looking for fall color, black gum or sweet gum, both of them have really good fall color.
Okay. Sounds good. Is there any other thoughts about plant placement within the stormwater easement that the HOA should be aware of?
Jim, what do you feel about the pin oak?
Pin oak's perfectly good. I mean, based on where they're putting it.
Okay.
It's a really crappy tree to put next to a site. I mean, it's got clearance issues. Since there's nothing there to worry about in terms of clearance, it's a great tree. My only concern is when we use it next to driveways and streets and sidewalks and things like that, you're constantly having to deal with those downward growing branches.
Okay. Any other questions on this plan? If not, we can move along to the reimbursements. Sure.
This is Eric Caldwell, Fairfax County Stormwater. I don't know if I'm muted.
No, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah. My only concern would be the red maple looks very close to the dam structure.
Okay.
So by our requirements, we can't have any trees or shrubs on the dam or within 10 feet of the dam structure, as their roots may impact the integrity of the dam itself. And I was just looking at a contour map, and it looks like that red maple would be a little too close.
Okay, so you're talking about the red maple by number 1? Location number
No, number 4.
Oh,
number 4.
Oh, okay. Okay. No problem. I can go ahead and have them move it out a little bit more. That's not a problem.
Yeah, I think if it's clearly outside of our easement, then we wouldn't have an issue with it.
Okay. Thank you for the feedback. All right, any other feedback before we move on to the reimbursements? Okay.
Okay, so before we move on, we need to move approval for this so that we would discuss this at the board meeting. Is that correct, Laura?
That we would be recommending approval at the board meeting unless there is anything, again, pending some of the adjustments that were recommended by the DRC.
So to clarify with the board members on the 4 other board members on the call, we are okay with this and that we would move for approval at the board meeting.
I'm fine.
This is Jerry. I'm fine.
This is Monica. I'm fine.
Okay.
And Adria, if you don't mind, I just wanted to thank Eric Caldwell for joining us this morning. This was really important that we had a representative from MSMD here to be able to take a look at this, and we look forward to continuing to work with you, Eric. So there's a lot to share and a lot of work, and we do hope that we have other homeowners associations that come forward with ideas like this and want to be good stewards of the land that's under their care, but certainly respect some of the needs from the maintenance side too. We don't want to make anybody's job any harder. So set folks up for success. So thanks again, Eric. Appreciate your input.
Thanks for your
Thank
expertise.
you for the invite.
And Chris, I'm guessing that you're good with this. I saw your blue spot pop up. Okay. So, Christina, I'm going to let you take over from here with the reimbursement.
Okay, perfect. So like I said, we have about 4 reimbursements this month. So this first one is located off of Paul Spring Road in the Mount Vernon area of Alexandria. So these are just some pictures before this homeowner was experiencing a lot of sogginess in her yard. Front yard was also located in a resource protection area right off of the main road. So she wanted to take a lot of her lawn out of turf and put it into conservation landscaping. So these are pictures before, and these are some pictures after. So she converted about 1,200 square feet of turf into conservation landscaping. She's got a variety of different sizes of plants in here. So she had some larger shrubs, she has some smaller perennials. Actually, one of the things that I noticed when I was out on site was that whoever designed her landscape definitely took advantage of the concept of green mulch, because I noticed that there is a lot of smaller plugs of sedges and ground covers dispersed between the larger plants. So that was really interesting. So you'll see here just some of those plantings. And the homeowner was feeling very inspired, and she told me before the visit that she is feeling inspired to do this all over her yard now. So it's always great to see people get inspired by conservation landscaping. And this is just another view of that.
Christina, if she is inspired, encourage her to remove the turf from around the base of the trees.
Yes, she's actually
They will be
mentioned to me that
happier.
she was, yeah, she mentioned to me that she was working on that.
Okay.
So,
The trees,
yeah,
she does that.
yeah.
Hey, Christina, also, I wanted to just comment that I think it's a nice looking planting. Also, we've had a couple other, remember there was one application in particular that was more extensive. There was a driveway ponding water, and they wanted to do a lot of extensive drainage improvements. And it may have, something like what this lady did may have been an appropriate response for a lot of that water, since it did seem to drain, but just wasn't draining quickly. Also, I think that for quite a while there was the mania about rain gardens, where rain gardens are not a cure-all, but I think that well-placed vegetation like this could do so much, A, to adapt to the wet condition and take advantage of it, and B, to reduce the pooling duration over time. So it's just it's a really nice application of conservation landscaping.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, the homeowner just mentioned right after installation that it rained pretty hard the few days following, and that the landscaping stood up pretty well and it wasn't soggy for very long. So, having people see those results is always nice. Our dollars have been put to work, which is what we want to see. So this next finished project was a rain garden located in Falls Church. Actually, where this home is located in the neighborhood, there's a lot of really large homes going up. So there were some large homes uphill that were constructed within the past few years that was creating some runoff issues on this person's property. You also had some downspout runoff that was also contributing to the area. So these are just some pictures before the rain garden installation. And these are some pictures after. So you might notice that this berm is built up a little bit. The homeowner mentioned that their contractor gave them the option of building up the berm in a more strategic way, because to the left here, it's actually sloping towards her neighbor's yard. So she opted to just keep that some of that soil on site to help build up the berm to stop some of the water going into the neighbor's yard. So that's kind of what you're seeing here. And this is just another view of the rain garden as well. Homeowners pretty happy. They actually were able to tie in this downspout you see here into the rain garden. So she has mentioned that it has improved the drainage quite nicely in her backyard. And this is just another view of that. Okay, so this next project is a conservation landscaping located in the city of Alexandria at Fairlington UMC. So before, they were experiencing a lot of erosion on this slope here because of parking lot runoff. This area is also on a main stretch of road where a lot of people drive by, so they wanted to improve this area in an ecologically benefit way, in a way that the area would ecologically benefit. So these are some pictures before. And these are some pictures after. So they actually moved this little parking space bar here to help direct some of the water into the turf area and the conservation landscaping area. They also opted to do a lot more grasses than perennials just to sort of give it more of that natural look, which I thought was really interesting coming from, I just went to a more structured conservation landscaping installation, which looks really nice, but I also really liked this one, but for different reasons, just because it kind of had like that natural meadow look to it. So you could see a little bit more of that here. So the congregation is very happy with the installation and the project overall. They have some like conservation landscaping dispersed in this grass area and, you know, different areas, but I think this is sort of the star piece of their conservation landscaping on their campus. So they're very happy with the work that was done. And then just another picture of the grass here. All right, and then our last reimbursement for this month was also located in the city of Alexandria. Just as a refresh, this homeowner has a little sloped area in her backyard here and is experiencing some erosion. So she wanted to put in some conservation landscaping to help cover some of those bare vegetated areas. So these are just some pictures before. They also sent in some like really nice during construction pictures, so you can see them working on this area here. And this is just a picture after. So they were able to save some of the smaller trees and shrubs, or I think these are mostly shrubs, that they actually bought from our seedling sale in previous years. So they're able to save and transplant some of those into the conservation landscaping. You can see they use some smaller plants, a lot of ground cover for this area as well. You can see another picture there. All right, does anybody have any questions about reimbursements before we move on to the last of the FY21 program changes?
Christina, this is Jerry. I can assume that the cost that we approved before, nothing's changed there as far as what they're being reimbursed?
Oh, yes, all of the reimbursements were right on budget.
Normal, good, okay, thank you.
Yep. Right. Any other comments before we move on? Right.
So are we all in agreement that we will all move for approval of those reimbursements at the board meeting?
This is John. I'm fine.
This is Jerry, fine.
Monica, fine.
Chris, I just took you off of mute, Chris, in case you wanted to share your opinion as well.
I'm good with it. How is the muting working? I see we're on mute, but how are people talking?
Well, Chris, it may have been that I muted you. I see that you're on a headset, but I had you muted. If you want to mute yourself, that's fine. I can stay in control, whatever you would like to do.
It just seems you're controlling us a little more than you have on other days.
Well, we're trying to make sure that we hear everybody. So if you would like to mute yourself, then I'll leave it to you.
All right.
Right, I think we're all good to go, Christina.
Perfect. So I just wanted to give you all a refresh of our timeline for this year, for the FY21 program year. So our site visit request period opened on July 1st. As of yesterday morning, we had about 16 site visit request applications saved on our shares drive. So we're getting them in slowly but surely. Last year, we saw kind of a bum rush of applications that last week that the application period was open. So I'm expecting that to be the case this year. So 16 might not sound like a lot now, but I assure you that we will likely get a lot more in the coming weeks. So just as a reminder, August 19th is when our site visit request period closes. Between August 31st and September 2nd, the 50 applicants will be chosen, and we will start scheduling site visits, and they will begin by mid-September at the latest. And then December 16th will be when all of those site visits will be completed. As a reminder, we do have one submission change this year. We are accepting applications on a rolling basis after people have been chosen for site visits. So if somebody receives a visit, say end of September, they're able to submit an official project application shortly after, potentially to be considered for cost share funding in October. And we made this change due to the amount of guaranteed funding that the state association has, where they're receiving a lot less this year than they have in previous years. And we're also trying to help staff and help our contractors spread out the workload a little bit. Last year, we kind of had, we had a unique situation where one contractor was sort of on the hook for a lot of our VCAP projects, and it just kind of turned out that way. And her and some other people had expressed, if they were able to submit way back when, it would have helped, spread out the workload throughout the season. So that is why we made that change this year. So this month, we're just going to talk about some changes to the ranking criteria. We had mentioned last month that we have two different sections on our ranking criteria this year. We have the geographic considerations, which we looked at and approved last month. This month, we're going to be looking at the ranking criteria for the now required narrative and picture portion of the site visit request form. And then we're also going to take a look at one change with the priority areas that is accounted for within our site visit request application. So I'm going to start with the ranking criteria for the narrative portion of the application. All right, so make this a little bit bigger here. So like I mentioned before, we went over the geographic considerations last month. So this month, we're going to take a look at the picture and narrative scoring rubric. So as you can see here, we have 4 or 5 different ranking criteria on a point scale of 1 to 5. And those criteria are the quality of the pictures, whether or not the description, so the narrative matches the resource concern, the clarity of the problem and project description, the demonstrated need of a VCAP project, and the potential water quality or environmental benefit. And so we have all of those ranking criteria on a point scale 1 to 5. And then I won't go through all of it, but I just wanted to show you that we have sparsed out the points and sort of given guidance to to help staff rank those site visit request applications. So 1 to 5 isn't just an arbitrary 1 to 5. We do have some criteria that we should be looking at in terms of ranking these specific applications. So for example, just want to take a look at the quality of pictures ranking criteria. You'll see here that I've sparsed out each point value 1 to 5 and given sort of a description or guidance to help staff move forward in ranking these site visits appropriately. So number 1 is obviously a poor quality picture. Maybe the picture is blurry. Maybe from the picture that they sent, we can't tell what the resource concern is, or the pictures don't convey what the resource concern is. They may have sent one legible picture, and they may have also included pictures that were scanned in, or maybe didn't include pictures at all. So a lot of the times, people will scan in pictures to us, but with the scanning and the fact that it's printed, there's some discoloration, and we can't really tell. So that would be an example of a poor quality picture. For a picture that would be, I would say, is an excellent quality. So on number 5, you can very clearly tell what the resource concern is. It might include some pictures or maybe even video taken during a rain event, so you can sort of see how the water is moving and what's causing that damage. And then all of the pictures that have been sent are legible and not blurry. So just really high quality pictures. We can very clearly tell what the problem is. It really shows, how the water is moving on site. Like I mentioned, there might be some video accompanying this, and we do get people that do send us videos, so people have that option to send it if they need to. And then again, we've sort of sparsed out 1 through 5 for all of those 5 ranking criteria. So we've got some guidance on how to rank, whether or not the description matches the resource concern. So number 1, no resource concern is evident, or maybe the issue is not within purview of VCAP. So for example, if an HOA sent us a site visit request form and it's very clearly an issue that needs to be handled by the municipality, then we would probably give that a 1, just because even if, you know, we were to give them a site visit, any of the projects that we have that we could fund under VCAP just wouldn't be an appropriate solution anyway. So there is also that. That's also something to consider when ranking the site visits as well. Another thing I wanted to show you all, again, under clarity of problem and project description, number 1, you can't really tell the extent of the issue, or the issue might not be something that VCAP can help resolve. And then obviously, number 5, the narrative is concise, descriptive, exhibits the resource concern, may also include previous mitigation strategies. They may also already be working with a contractor. So, you know, sometimes people will write to us and say like, oh, in the past, I've tried to overseed in the fall, or maybe I've tried to, you know, build up slight berms to help divert water, and like, you know, just having some evidence of mitigation strategies that they've already tried from like a small like homeowner landscape scale. It just shows, I think, motivation to resolve the issue. So that's why we would have that under that. So the demonstrated need, I think with this ranking criteria, we've also built in whether or not maybe a project is more aesthetic in nature, or maybe if a resource concern doesn't exist. So for example, if somebody just has a turfed area in their backyard where they would like conservation landscaping, yes, the area can definitely benefit, you know, taking that area out of turf and converting it to conservation landscaping, absolutely. But from a resource concern perspective and from a VCAP statewide perspective, they really focus on these resource concerns. So we're gonna be leaning more into that to help solve drainage and erosion issues. So as such, we've created this scale under demonstrated need a little bit more in depth. And then for the potential water quality or environmental benefit, we've ranked it on 1 to 5 from potential water quality benefits. So that's kind of like that small conservation landscaping in the back that's just taking out maybe 200 to 300 square feet of turf, to the large water quality benefit for property and surrounding areas, so out of 5. So this would be something like an infiltration practice, maybe an HOA or a place of worship sized practice, maybe large partnership practices, and maybe practices that are taking a lot of runoff from surrounding areas and helping, you know, not only does the homeowner benefit, but the surrounding parcels or surrounding land could also benefit from that. So that's sort of how we're going to be looking at the narrative and the photo description, along with all of the geographic indicators. So the geographic indicators such as, you know, where in the watershed are you located? You know, what's your soil type? Like those sorts of things are pretty straightforward. They kind of are or they aren't. This is where we're hoping to pick up a little bit more of those points that help differentiate between, you know, what would be a quote unquote good site visit versus one that, you know, might not have as much of a water quality benefit associated with it. In the event that we have a tie, I'm hoping that the comments that staff can give in this area, you know, maybe there are a couple things that they can note with this project application that, you know, might not be evident otherwise from a point scale perspective. So there is an area here for comments, you know, what they might see as strengths or weaknesses that might not necessarily be reflected in the point scale, and hoping that those comments, in the event of a tiebreaker, can help us sort of sparse out which site visits to go on. So I guess we'll start with any feedback on this part, and then after we discuss this part, I'll move on to the new priority areas that we have.
Christina, this is John. I just have a question. Do we consider any other environmental benefits other than water quality, or could we?
We could in the future, absolutely. But at this time, just based on how the state ranks, the emphasis on the resource concerns and the way that the state ultimately ranks project applications, that's kind of like where we pulled all of this from.
Understand. That's something we might want to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other feedback?
This is Laura. I just wanted to mention that I think this is a really important component to the ranking of the site visits, and some of these different kinds of criteria are really where we're going to be able to differentiate between some of the different project areas. And as Christina and I have talked about this quite a bit over the last couple of months in terms of looking at things for our site visit requests. And this is really pre-conceptual stage for a lot of these different projects. So where with grants and many other grants, you may be getting the application with a project that's pretty well fleshed out. We're getting these site visit requests with people who are saying, well, I've got a problem and I'm not exactly sure how to fix it. So I think that this is going to be a very helpful way of being able to differentiate between some of those different sites. And while this is always going to be a bit of a work in progress as we're tightening things up, and John, what you were just mentioning in terms of thinking about other environmental benefits is really good. I think it's a good start, and I'm anxious to roll it out and see how it works. But I do think that this is going to be really important, especially if we have a number of sites that rank relatively closely at that 50 application point. In differentiating what we need to do, and working with staff to kind of come up with those with the final 50.
Great. All right, if nobody has any other feedback on this, I guess I will just keep trucking along with the updates. So...
I do have a quick question of John, and I think your mention, John, of quantifying or maybe at least assessing other benefits. Maybe a thought would be, can we better understand? And Christina, you can tell us what are you supposed to, based on the guidance of the program, assess, and B, what would we like to see in terms of additional benefits assessed for future discussion? That way, we have a kind of a what's required and what we'd like to see, and kind of put those two together to see if there's any opportunity in the future to add to it.
Yeah, I mean, from John's perspective, I know that we've always talked about trying to sort of quantify the actual nutrient reduction within our site visit ranking criteria and within the state ranking criteria. And I definitely think that that's the direction we are headed. It's just unfortunately with the overall state ranking criteria, we kind of need to stay within what they prioritize at this time so that our projects can be pushed through to that. However, that's not to say that, since we do sit on the state steering committee, we can't keep pushing for that. And we have pushed for that every year. And I would say that we're sort of inching closer and closer to that, but we're just not there yet.
The other thing I was thinking of, Chris, is going back to my Watershed days. There are a lot of benefits that we might be able to actually calculate on erosion control and sedimentation and the reduction of it. So those are some kinds of things to keep in mind, which could affect water quality, but could affect other things too, like infertile overwash and all manner of things dealing with what sediment can damage. I don't know where we're getting that feedback.
Well, I was going to say, John, I agree with you. I think that obviously, and Christine, you have a lot more experience with this than us in terms of keeping it pretty straightforward and not overwhelming for the property owner. But I think it's a great idea to try to assess what we can as minimum nutrients. And it helps, I think, bolster probably the funding in the future too, because as we enter, you know, I know as municipalities, we have limited opportunity to do source controls. So we're usually constrained to end of pipe. And without redevelopment, where you have a regulated land process where somebody's made to put in controls that meet the current standards, there's limited opportunity outside of programs like this one to get to private lands. And so I think it's a really good thing to be able to capture the benefits of these practices. And that will help the homeowner, it will help this program, and I think it will probably help the funding in the future as people are more and more pressed to come up with ways to reduce their loads going, down into Chesapeake Bay, as well as local TMDL impacts.
Charles, if you don't mind me jumping in here real quick, but I think that's a wonderful segue into the Long Branch Central project, which I really appreciate that you're going to have the opportunity to share with everyone. I think that is an opportunity to really pilot some of these concepts and test out some of these different ideas with doing a little bit of the work ahead of time to identify where those areas for runoff reduction would have the most benefit for the downstream location as well. So there's definitely some opportunity there to think through some of these different kinds of things. But John, what you were saying as well with overwash, I think that the Long Branch Central project is going to be a great opportunity to start thinking about that, particularly since it's a sediment TMDL, and we are looking at ways of being able to reduce those kinds of impacts. So anyway, I want to just throw that little bit of anticipation in there as we and kind of hoping that we can keep that in the back of our minds as we head into that conversation once we wrap up the VCAP work here too. I'll turn it back to you, Christina.
Okay, thanks, Laura. So I'm just going to share just sort of the final spreadsheet that we'll be using to rank site visit requests this year. So like I mentioned last month, we have our geographic criteria for consideration up here, totaling 120 possible points. So we did change that point scale just a little bit there. And then with the inclusion of the photo and narrative scoring rubric with the 5 additional ranking criteria, that is an additional 25 more points possible with a total points possible value of 145 points. So that point scale is going to be point spread is going to be different than it has been in past years. They believe last year we were working on like a 25-point scale. So we're hoping with this larger spread and more ranking criteria added, we can sort of get to a little bit more of, those details that we can differentiate between site visits should there be any sort of tie. So our priority watersheds have stayed the same. They haven't changed. Targeted communities, we have some of the areas that we've worked in previously within Fairfax County where we have a presence. And then also we had last year for the first time, we had the inclusion. We were lucky to have some feedback from the Reston Association on some areas within Reston boundaries that they're interested in really promoting VCAP and CAP. So this year it's still the same. Lake Winds 1 and 2 off of Lake Thoreau, Water's Edge and Lake Anne, and then Newport Shores right off of Lake Newport. So those are the 3 areas that the Reston Association has sort of deemed their priority areas. We'd still like to encourage projects within the city of Fairfax and the city of Alexandria. We were really lucky this past spring to be able to sit down with the city of Alexandria, and we've sort of come up with a game plan on how to sort of tackle the city of Alexandria projects. I think what we decided was with our representative from the city was to sit down with all of their site visit requests within City of Alexandria boundaries, and then she would help me, since she knows the area a little bit better and a little bit of the history that's going on between these communities, she would sort of help guide us to some site visit request recommendations that she thinks would be good projects within city boundaries. So we're going to continue to keep those lines of communication open so that we can make sure that we are getting the best possible projects out there. So that's how that looks from a paper standpoint. One priority area that I did want to bring to your guys' attention was that in past years, we have used the free and reduced lunch scale to sort of determine priority areas in the county. But this year we decided to dive a little bit deeper and take a look at median household income instead, just because we felt that the priority areas using the free and reduced lunch, it was still a little bit broad in terms of, you know, what exactly we were trying to portray. It was still a really, I would say, just more of like, oh, these areas just happen to overlap with our priority watersheds, some of the targeted communities that we're looking at. So we really wanted to put in some work to sort of narrow down that area. So what we did was we used median household income, and I apologize that there isn't a legend on here. My ARC map was not exporting the map correctly, so I only have a picture of the map here, but I'll be sure to have the legend on here for board purposes next week. But we were looking at median household income within Fairfax County, and to do that, so just as a refresher, median household income in Fairfax County is $120,000. When you select that within ArcMap, that's a lot of Fairfax County. So we tried to look at, okay, so like what is the national poverty line? So households at the national poverty line, it's about $25,000 across the United States, and it's also about the same within Fairfax County. So we took that number, and then we also took the average household or median household income in Fairfax County, so $120,000, and we just took the average of the two. So the number that we came up with was about $74,000, and those communities with median household income of $74,000 or less are noted here in this map in these orange shaded areas. So we feel that using this map is a little bit more targeted in our approach in terms of reaching areas of the community that, you know, have a lower socioeconomic status. To, you know, one of the things that we have really stressed the past 2 years with the program was making sure that it's equitable and available to everybody in Fairfax County, not just people that can afford it. So using this map, we are hoping that we can do a little bit more targeted outreach within the areas. And you can see we still have some of those areas within the socioeconomic bracket that we're looking at that are still located within the priority watersheds that we're looking at as well. So there's a lot of opportunity for overlap with this map. So instead of using the free and reduced lunch scale that we have used in the past, we're going to be using the median household income of $75,000 or $74,000 or less, sort of as a benchmark and as a tool to do more targeted outreach.
And I just jumped on here real quick because I wanted to mention that we had reached out to Fairfax County Neighborhood and Community Services to ask them for a little bit of guidance on what they use to help identify some of the communities that would best benefit from their services across the county. And it was recommended that the approach that we did take was the recommended approach. And I just wanted to also acknowledge this is from census data that Christina pulled together these maps based on census blocks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, census blocks, yeah.
And the poverty rate is based on a family of 4, so it's not an individual.
Yes, family of 4. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So just wanted to make those few points there.
Thanks, Laura, for bringing it up. That was very important.
Christina and Laura, this is Jim. When you were selecting your priority watersheds, did you reference the change analysis that was done on tree canopy in 2015?
We did not.
Okay, well, that's really curious because the priority watersheds you identified are all the ones that experienced the largest decrease in tree canopy between 2011 and 2015.
Jump on here real quick. That's really interesting information, Jim. A lot of the background information for those targeted watersheds is also was based primarily on water quality data from stormwater planning, particularly and it's an oldie but a goodie, the stream protection strategy that was done back in the early 2000s. So it's unfortunate, but those watersheds have been identified for quite some time as needing some assistance. And I know that there's a lot of work that's going into trying to support those too. Should back up and say it was the stream protection strategy as well as any local TMDL that was not bacterial in nature, that had more of a particular land use stressor. But that's interesting. We'll have to make a note of that as well. There's definitely some complementing benefits to the program.
There's some interesting drivers out there that are pushing a lot of environmental variables.
Is good to know. Is there any other feedback from or comments from anybody else?
Christina, is this how other soil and water districts rank theirs, or how have you talked to other people? I mean, this is very specific, and very thought out and very thought through. So I really appreciate the research that you've done on this, and I know you've worked on this hard, and the staff as a team. And other places around the state, because you're on that state steering committee, do you hear about how their rankings may be, and are they following what we're doing, or how's that work?
So I think that every district largely is doing a variation of sort of the process that we have and just what works in their area. We are the only district that I'm aware of that puts this much research into making sure the program is equitable. A lot of other districts do use like a site visit request form and do cap a certain amount of requests. So for example, I believe Prince William might, or at least the last time I talked to them, they were capping requests and having like a site visit request period. Thomas Jefferson does a site visit request period as well, or will be starting to do that. But to my knowledge, they're not most districts aren't cutting off applications at a certain time, and they're not looking at sort of, from the planning side, how to make the program more widespread across an area. So we're the first.
Well, I really appreciate this, and I think that it shows that we're doing our due diligence. The county with their One Fairfax initiatives and all the equity programs going on, I think it's very well thought out. So thank you.
Yep. All right. Well, if nobody else has anything to comment on that, I think that is all that I have to present for today. So I guess we would just need recommendation for approval of the new narrative and photo portion of the ranking rubric, and also the change to the priority areas using median household income based on census block.
I will be in favor of that. I just want to make sure that the rest of the board is in favor as we go into the board meeting next week.
This is Jerry. I do have a question. This is not an objection, just a question. With the emphasis on the quality of the site visit request, are we going to end up excluding do-it-yourselfers and end up with the quality of applications that would only come from a contractor? I don't think we should make this an exclusive contractor program.
So I don't think so. I mean, really the site visit request application is based on how well it's filled out, and I don't see why if somebody who is a do-it-yourselfer couldn't fill out a really solid site visit request application. With that being said, based on state change from the steering committee perspective, they just really don't incentivize do-it-yourself projects anymore. It's still the 12, only up to 12 volunteer hours using, volunteer labor to install a project. And unfortunately, as such, a lot of people see that, and they also see the maintenance agreement. So people are more inclined to lean towards a professional installation just because they know that there's that maintenance agreement attached to it.
I understand, and I also believe that a lot of the outreach that we might like to do with more and more homeowners is the reason we're being selective now, because there were just too many applications demanding too much time, too much input on our part that we weren't getting paid for. The $500 doesn't cover the kind of help that we were providing there for a while to each homeowner who came along. So I understand we can afford to do that, but I guess this is a request just as we go forward to whoever is doing this, and I understand you're going to be leading, right?
I am, yes.
Effective when?
August 14th.
So who's going to end up having to implement this? Do we know yet, Laura?
I think that's a Laura question.
Okay.
I was like, I don't know.
Okay. I'm not going to put you on the spot anymore, but I just want to suggest that whoever does do it, we stay attuned to that, and if we see that we're excluding well-meaning, potentially capable do-it-yourselfers, that we deal with that as it comes up. It may not be much of a problem. I don't know. That's really only something that you or your replacement would be able to get a handle on. But I don't want to exclude people who want to step forward and do it for themselves. That's all.
Gary, I'm sorry, can I follow up there a little bit? I think one of the things that this program is such a wonderful program.
There's too much interference, guys.
You okay now? This program is such a wonderful program because of it's gaining a lot of recognition, it's offering a lot of education, but also you have people getting motivated, obviously the funding component, but also because it can cross that bridge sometimes to the structural and the planting and the non-structural. But one of the things I think that obviously every program has limitations in terms of what it can hit. I know it's hard to sometimes track synergistic programs, but for instance, Adria's Master Gardeners and other programs that through extension that offer a lot of wonderful information for people who do it themselves. There's also the Plant Nova Natives with NVRC's coordination as a critical component to that. And then there's also Audubon at Home, and those are just a few. So I think there are quite a few efforts going on where people are doing it themselves. And I agree with you, Jerry, we don't want to exclude people at all. We want to encourage people to be able to do it themselves. But it also might be good as we go forward to periodically reach out to some of those organizations who I know that, for instance, Audubon at Home, I'm on the technical review committee for them. And they do a really good job of tracking where they have properties in their program, the certified landscapes, and they're not quantifying it in the same way this program is. But I would suggest that those properties may well provide some of the same benefits that the conservation landscaping properties provide. They just haven't been assessed in the same way. And they may have different drivers. But so anyway, I think that maybe two parts then. So I agree with you on the not excluding do-it-yourselfers, but also realizing there's a lot of other opportunities to provide support, maybe at least through education, through Adria's program, where you have a tremendous number of people that actually do really good work reaching out and maybe offering advice, maybe looking at the property with them or for them. So there's complementary avenues out there.
Yeah, and I think that all of this whole conversation hits to a really important point that our district specifically has been pushing for, is that we just need an allocation, because if we had an allocation from the state, we can prioritize those do-it-yourself projects and we can prioritize a lot of these other things. It's just, unfortunately, if we want our projects to go through and get approved at the state level, we kind of have to align our program a little bit to what they prioritize. So we say it every month at the steering committee. This is why we need an allocation, and I do think I think we're getting close. I think we're getting close, guys. So we'll just have to see how the next couple of years.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you.
Yep.
I also just wanted to mention real quick that when we receive the site visit request forms, everybody is on the same playing field in terms of what they are. Where they're at. Some of them may have already engaged a contractor, or some of them may be in different phases of their thought process. But we really don't know whether it's a DIY project unless they explicitly say that they are working with a contractor. So we assume that everybody is a DIYer or has the potential to be a DIYer. I mean, that's something that we can really assume unless they state otherwise. So at this phase, I'm absolutely with you, Jerry, and I think Charles said it as well, is we do not want to be exclusive, but there's certainly some, and that there are these other programs that we do actually refer people to participate in if they're eager to move forward sooner than later. I would also say, just based upon what I saw from Earth Sangha this past spring, there are a lot of DIYers out there that are doing the work that we are not able to capture or not able to see, the work that they're doing. But there are absolutely a lot of people that are putting in conservation landscaping at their pace, and that's very exciting. And things like our program, the wonderful work that's being provided by the Master Gardeners and Plant Nova Natives and the Audubon at Home. I mean, there is a slew of different groups that are all working in complementary efforts to try and make sure that people have the resources that they need to be able to do the kinds of projects that they want. So I think we could potentially see in the future more structural kinds of projects coming our way as we have more people wanting to do DIY projects and wanting to take just a different route to get there. So we'll see. But I'm with Christina. I've been saying this for a long time about the need for an allocation to give us a little bit of control over how we decide where projects go, and working with the community on that as well. But that would just make things a lot easier and put a little bit more of the thoughts that we've all shared over the last several years, put those into action. So yes, like Christina says, stay tuned. I'm going to the steering committee meeting this month. I'm going to be that representative, but I've been the alternate for quite some time. And certainly as we have, transition the program here in the fall, Christina's leaving it in really good shape, and that's extremely appreciated. So I won't say it's going to be easy for the next person to step in, because you're leaving big shoes, Christina. But I appreciate that at least they're going to be heading in the right direction. So. I think, Jerry, you had a question. Is there any other concerns from board members, or any other questions that you might have for Christina on the recommended narrative ranking criteria and the targeted areas?
I don't have a comment on the criteria, but I do want to note, Christina, if you're not going to be here for our meetings next month, I guess we'll see you next week. But I want to thank you for all the thought and the work that you've put into this program and gotten where it is. Excellent job. Thank you.
Thank you. was all a team effort.
Here, here.
Well, we will miss you, Christina, and I know you won't be far, but you still have lots of fans here. So if you need anything, we're here for you, and we hope that you have the best future ever. So anything else to come before this committee? Or any other questions on some of these things that we're going to vote on at the board meeting on Tuesday?
Adria, are we going to do Long Branch?
Oh, sorry.
Laura, I'm at you're calling the shots. You go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Charles, what's going on with your microphone? Do you have something with your connection? Because you sound like a gremlin has attacked you.
I have not had any problems on any other system now.
No, it's got a rumbling background.
Huh, that's odd. Can you hear my voice at all, or is it just crunchy and?
It's just interference, Charles. We can hear in the volumes okay, but there's a crackling that I can barely tell what you're saying.
You sound like you're a 1980s video movie from TV is what you sound like. Sorry, Charles.
I'm only getting about every other word.
If I mute my microphone, can I call in?
Yes, you can.
Yes. Charles, do you have the call-in information? All right, so we'll just hold steady for a few minutes until Charles is able to call in. And even while you're doing that, Charles, you're more than welcome to pull up your presentation as well. Hopefully you've got presenter privileges. Let me see. You should be able to share your screen.
While we're dealing with those technical difficulties, this is the first I've heard that Christina is going to be leaving us. And well, we're obviously sorry to see you go. It's been a very great pleasure to work with you. They say you're not going far, so I assume you've got a job or you're doing something nearby.
Yeah, I'm actually just going to be finishing up my master's degree full time so that I can finish within a year.
Okay, well, good luck with that.
Yeah, thanks.
Christina, I was intending to follow up after Jerry's comments on your good work, but I was on mute, so it didn't come through. You've done a great job on this project, and the advancements and the participation and the completeness of it has really improved over the last 2 years on your. So congratulations and thank you, and I'll miss you.
Thanks.
Agreed, Christina. This is Monica. I've only gotten to be with you for a short time, but I'm just very impressed with your level of work and expertise and managing our questions over and over again. It's just been a pleasure to work with you in the short time I've worked with you. And thank you for your dedication to the environment. You're making a huge difference, and I look forward to seeing what comes out of you, in the future, because you're going to make amazing strides for whatever your path is.
Yeah, hoping to leave my mark, somewhere in the field, wherever that may be, starting here and hoping to land somewhere just as great in the future. So I guess stay tuned. I really do feel like I will see a lot more of you guys wherever I end up. So it's not a goodbye.
Can you all hear me now?
We can.
Very
Okay,
clear.
good. All right. Let me try to. All right, so hopefully you're seeing my screen now. So the Long Branch Central Watershed Management Area project is covering an entire sub-drainage area that's Long Branch Central. There are 3 long branches in the Accotink Creek watershed. There's Long Branch North, which is up towards Route 50 and Merrifield. Long Branch Central, which is here, sandwiched between Route 236 and Braddock Road, flowing from roughly Woodson High School down to Canterbury Woods Park at Wakefield Chapel Road. And then there's Long Branch South, which is down in the southern end of the county in the Beulah Road area. So Long Branch Central is actually called out within the Accotink Creek TMDL. It has its own TMDL waste load allocation, and Fairfax County is solely responsible for meeting that waste load allocation or that reduction target. So we've been working for about 5 years to put this project together, and it's the largest thing in the scale we've ever done, because we've typically, even though we've planned 30 watersheds in the county, we've been implementing at the reach level for our projects. So for this project, our primary goal is to achieve the targeted waste load reduction that's required in the Long Branch Central portion of the Accotink Creek TMDL. The other thing is that we're looking obviously at infrastructure that's failed, and we have a lot of degraded stream channels. So whatever we build, we want to ensure is survivable, stable, and has a lowest possible life cycle maintenance cost. We want to improve the water quality within the Long Branch Central watershed, and then the habitat and ecological lift. And I'll remind everybody that the impairment is actually, even though sediment is the primary regulated pollutant that we're being required to address, it's really a benthic impairment. So it is a proxy for the benthic problem. And I think what we want to try to show within this project is, A, you don't have to touch everything. You're going to have to really, and actually, this is why I put that on the next one. Well, let me talk a bit about that with the what we're going to do. So there's about 8 miles of stream, there's about 100 outfalls, and there are a mixture of public and privately maintained facilities. We will look at all of them, and then we estimate that we may restore as much as 6 miles of stream, as many as 75 outfalls, and then look at the county facilities. There are some private facilities that, if they are able to be aligned, with a minimal amount of pain, because sometimes the land rights issues are difficult, that we may be able to capture some of the private facilities for source control. And then we are starting our assessment now. We plan to work very closely with the large stakeholder group and the communities and Supervisor Walkinshaw's office. And Supervisor Walkinshaw, if you haven't met him, he's very supportive of environmental efforts, and they're very excited about this project. We think that what we'll probably end up with is we have to complete essentially a work plan. We have to decide, based on the assessment of the entire watershed and the input from the community and all the stakeholders, what are our goals? What are the things we're trying to accomplish? Put together a work plan that addresses those, with the TMDL being one of the primary components. And then we'll actually start probably completing construction plans in about 2 years and begin construction in about 2 years. And we think that construction, which obviously we don't know the cost what that will be in the scope and scale, will take at least 5 to 6 years. And then we'll be in a longer warranty monitoring phase after that. So the participants right now include obviously Public Works, Soil and Water Conservation District. Park Authority is the major landowner. There are some private parcels we'll work with too. There are quite a few schools in the drainage area. We haven't had direct contact with the schools yet about this project, but I think as we identify opportunities, we'll definitely reach out to them. Biohabitats was the selected consultant, so we have a contract with them, a standalone contract just for this project. And that initial contract is just for this first phase of assessment and putting the work plan together, and then we'll actually contract the additional services as we identify what the workload is. Supervisor Walkinshaw's office that I mentioned. And then the identified stakeholders to date include the Friends of Long Branch, which is a really good local group that's come to the fore. They've got a lot of energy. The Friends of Accotink Creek, I've had several conversations with Philip Latassa about this. Earth Sangha, we actually met with them in the field. They have multiple projects in the watershed and wanted to continue to be involved and expand the opportunities for them to have an impact in the watershed. And 2 civic associations, Stonehaven and Red Fox. They're both Stonehaven is down near Canterbury Woods, and Red Fox is about halfway up the watershed on the south side. And that's actually where Diane lives. And then a lot of residents. So we know we'll have more groups, and there'll be a lot of individuals who will have interest. And I've already talked to some of the stakeholders and gotten some initial feedback about the things they don't want to see. They don't want to be surprised. They don't want to see their parks trashed. They don't want to see, a lot of negative impacts in the process of trying to provide good benefits. So we're going to have to really manage expectations, understand where the areas of opportunity are. In some areas we just won't touch. I think that'll be the end point. So we need to balance it. So we kicked off with biohabitats on the 15th last week, and along with Laura and Christina to make that call. Maria was, I think, on the first call we had, and then the Park Authority, obviously. And then we are beginning to reach out to the stakeholders. Already had contact. We'll actually probably be doing a public meeting in September, organized by Supervisor Walkinshaw's office. We're beginning the process of collecting data. So a lot of that's gathering existing data, coming up with a work plan to actually do field work, and then developing a communications plan is a critical piece. And then we'll have to figure out from that communications plan how we capture input. It's easier from the stakeholders because we'll have regular conversations, but getting word out to the community and giving them a means to provide us input and feedback will be critical. And I mentioned the implementation plan. Before I go into the discussion and questions, I kind of had mentioned before that one of the big issues that we've experienced within our own projects is that we have tended in the past to focus on stability as the primary thing that we have to address. And we realize increasingly that it is not stability, but instead it is the ability to provide appreciable benefit within, watershed without necessarily being focused on stable transport systems. Stormwaters traditionally has been detention and treatment and conveyance. And what's being realized now with stream restoration is you have to balance source, transport, and deposition, and look at them. For instance, I want to push the theory or the thought process that residence time of the water may be a more important driver than stability of the channel. So, essentially, it's the longer you can hold the water within those floodplains, and hopefully you can get some source controls too. The longer you can hold water as far upslope as possible, and the longer it takes to get through that system, the better the water quality and the less erosion on the downstream end. And it sounds simplistic, but because we've been so focused on hardening channels, we've kind of gotten away from, I think, in the past, that the important component is what does the water look like when it comes out. And I think what we'll find is as we start to develop some metrics on how to measure better what equates to improved water quality and potentially benthic lift, we'll also apply different tools to get there. So that's kind of the main overview. And just wanted to then open it up for discussion and questions.
Charles, this is Monica. I have a question. Is this stream of thought, sorry about that word, cohesive throughout beyond Northern Virginia and kind of becoming more pervasive throughout the Commonwealth? And if so, is there a thought to extending the Canyon buffer? Because it sounds to me like we're talking about keeping it in that space more, right? Like being able to hold it off and having a wider swath of the buffer might be of benefit to the protection, to achieving that.
Are you referring? So I'm sorry, Monica. I didn't catch it all. Were you saying that you understand that, and essentially I'm saying it too, that buffer or planting and improved vegetation is a method that's lower impact and could have appreciable benefit? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, exactly. And then thinking about maybe extending that buffer, because right now it's what, 100 feet, right?
Yeah. Well,
And
I think
so,
that a lot of the criticism, there is substantial literature now developing about whether or not stream restoration is effective at achieving its stated goals. So for instance, it's well known now that with methods that have been applied to date, almost no project has demonstrated benthic lift, which is, so ecologically, they're not bringing back the critters. Fish are not an issue because fish are tough, and they generally will make it in most systems if you put back more stable flow and have better base flow. I think the problem with that suggestion in urban areas is, where do you plant? Because in honesty, the county, both through, I know Jim's been involved with this in the past, urban forestry, the park authority, public works, has looked at areas to plant in the county, and they're actually few and far between. And most of the plantable space is on private land, and most people want that in lawn. So we do need to improve that and reduce that lawn and increase the tree cover. But in urban systems, we have limited capability of using vegetation to reduce the impacts of all this runoff. So we really are much more constrained to trying to get source controls in the uplands, which can be vegetative. And I think the VCAP program and the role that soil and water can play in this is a perfect role for soil and water. And are also into pipe, where we actually look at the how do we use the systems past the outfall or at the outfall and beyond to actually get water quality benefits. So that's part of the challenge of this project. I think what it will do, it will help us answer some of these urban questions, just like you've raised, is where are the opportunities and constraints to improving our systems and the water quality? And how do we honestly go about, trying to bring improvement while not destroying what's left in terms of the remaining natural areas? So that's truly the challenge.
Charles, one of the things I know I did pick up from what Monica was saying was a question about extending the buffer beyond 100 feet. And at least, well, there are two things about that. First, the science says that once you get to 100 feet, you're getting close to 100% of the value of the buffer. So making it wider in terms of water quality is not going to really improve things when you've got sheet flow through the buffer. The issue in urban areas is because of the way we treat our stormwater, we essentially turn all our curbs and gutters into ephemeral streams, and we need to bring them as well as the natural channels. And I think that's what you're getting to, is where are we going to be able to plant, and what's going to be, trying to get people to plant more trees. And that's something the Tree Commission has been looking at recently.
There actually has been some recent research. I'm sorry. There's been some recent research too, especially when it comes to buffer services, to suggest that 55 meters, so over 150 feet, is more effective ultimately from an environmental perspective with multiple services. And Jim is pointing out too these areas in uplands. I don't know if you remember, but it was actually back in before 2010, the county went through, and several of us that are on this call are part of the work groups at the time, to look at extending buffer requirements into the uplands on intermittent channels. And there was a really large hoopla, and there were a lot of people involved with the discussion, to include private property owners, public sector, private sector. And I think the bottom line is there was not political will to go after intermittent channels, because it takes away developable land and a tremendous percentage of the county. You know, the battles we fight on perennial channels have been very difficult and will continue to be so. And the battles that would develop on the intermittent channels would be tremendous. So I don't think anytime in the near future we'll be able to get mandated buffers, but I think your point and Jim's point is looking for opportunity areas is certainly really important. And I think that's going to be a partner component to this project, is where can we do outreach and cultivate owners, property owners, to increase their vegetative cover on their lands.
Charles, this is Chris. You and I have spoken a bit before about the relationship between the RPAs and the floodplains and the lack of kind of continuity between a lot of the county ordinances that reflect, you know, the requirements on both of them. It would seem to me that that is one area that we could significantly improve on without an awful lot of cost as far as trying to restore a plant, and particularly on the floodplains and the building requirements as they relate to the RPA. And, you know, we've had some problems with woodlark. And is woodlark in this area that you're just showed on the map? I couldn't see the map well enough to tell.
No, woodlark is a couple drainage areas away, up towards 236.
But, you know, is there any progress? And I know the ZMOD stuff is, I think, actually even going the wrong way in some of the protection requirements. Has there been more?
I don't, well, we had a conversation just last week, had a presentation on the status of all the county efforts to look at impacts from the, you know, infill lot development, impacts to RPAs and floodplains, all the efforts going on. And I will say that there was definitely internal conversation within the stormwater business area that we need to work harder to bring together floodplains and RPAs so that they can't be divided and conquered by those who know the rules really well and know how to tie LDS's hands when the staff feel pinned up against the wall. So I fully appreciate what you're saying, and I don't know at what point headway will be made on that. But yeah, it's certainly something that's critical in the future.
Is there anything we can do to help advance it? And if you need a district representative to participate with you, would very much be interested in doing that.
Well, I'll say that I'm not part of that primary work group. Katie Torgerson is the lead for our division. So Katie, if you know, is our planner. She's also an engineer who's done a tremendous amount of work on like the Tysons, trying to figure out how to bring better ordinances together for that. So anyway, Katie's the best person in our group to help coordinate efforts. I know there's a lot of other people participating. I'm just not aware of all of them offhand. For the Long Branch effort, we will really be trying to look holistically at every opportunity area. And the nice part about this one is we're trying to, again, figure out with all the people involved, the community, the stakeholders, how do we heal this system? How do we get the best benefit out of the, for this system? And where do we have opportunities and where do we not?
It's a challenge.
Charles, I have a question. I haven't, I'm aware of this literature, the criticism of the stream restoration has been done as far as providing benthic habitat. Has anybody tried doing assisted migration? Or are we just relying on the idea if we build the habitat, they'll find it and come to it? Because I know if you fix this stream, if you fix Long Branch Central and create really good habitat, the problem is there are no sensitive organisms that can, within a migratory distance of that stream, to come and live there.
Absolutely, Jim. As a matter of fact, our ecology group has done an assisted migration study. They actually have used these, are you familiar with I can't remember what they're called. They're like an eco tube. They're a coir tube that's stuffed with poisonous material. Yeah, habit tubes. There you go. So our ecologists put together a study starting about 4 years ago. And what they found in the first years of the study, they still have some of these out there, so they're still running it, but they really weren't getting establishment of critters in restored streams and in unrestored sites. The assisted migration piece wasn't really working. And so I think to date, my understanding is it really is the critters being able to hop between sites over time and self-seed. And that to date, there's really not a critical mass to get a breeding population into these areas where they currently don't exist. One area I will say is that we are working, and this is again through our aquatic ecology group, to better figure out what our true biota look like within urban areas, because it's the curves for benthic organisms are all skewed towards high quality sites. And developing an index for biological integrity that actually recognizes urban systems so that you have a benchmark that's more similar to a good quality urban system rather than a good quality system up in Highland County, you know. And
right.
I think what we're finding is there are some better markers and some achievable targets that we can probably begin to build and really improve the total biomass, even though we recognize the potential for that biomass is far lower in its diversity than in more, reference type systems like Prince William Forest Park.
Well, yeah, and Acatink Creek is the site of the chlorine TMDL. I mean, that's going to keep a lot of your biota from establishing.
Yeah, I think, Jerry, we certainly recognize that, and I don't think anybody knows what the long-term impacts of the chloride problem are, because A, we keep putting it down, and B, it seems to be cumulative, and it has, it stays in the system for long periods of time, so the average salinity within our urban water systems is actually increasing. That's going to be a big factor.
Charles, has anybody been looking at doing a life cycle analysis of these critters? I know one thing, I think it was you who said that you can protect all the vernal pools you want. If you don't protect the upland habitat for the adults, it's not going to do you any good. And I'm not really sure what stoneflies do when they are adults. I know we don't have to worry about mayflies because they don't even have digestive systems, but as adults, but
yeah. Well, I think what the data that our assessment groups collected over the last 20 years, they've actually found kind of startling instances where you've got organisms that may otherwise be considered sensitive occurring in areas that have relatively low water quality. What seems to be the case is that there are a couple factors. One is the life, like you're saying, what is the life cycle of that particular organism or group of organisms? So there are certain mayflies in the Beta-D group. Actually, the site that we took over from your significant other back in the day, the Park Authority over at Old Courthouse Spring Branch, that site, surprisingly, on the upstream portion of that sampling site that we used to run, actually hosts a variety of organisms that you wouldn't expect in Tyson's Corner, but it's just because you have a stream reach that was able to maintain a stable bed load and channel size, and because it has a cobble base that's natural, it has an aerated bed, which most of them are embedded. And as a result, you get these organisms that are comparatively sensitive. They are in an urban system, and they're persisting. The second factor is that the ecologists have found out, and looking at all their data and looking at what has significant correlation, that there are 3 or 4 habitat features that, if they're present, they're highly predictive of the potential. And of course, embeddedness is a primary one. If you have high embeddedness, you have low benthic abundance and diversity. But then there's also the habitat heterogeneity, aerated riffles, wood features. So there are some significant features, I think, that we can learn to build. And it actually goes back to some of the older literature. Some of the older literature found that major structural fixes, quote unquote, don't produce necessarily biological improvement. Instead, sometimes it's the placement of things like wood and simple features that provide the habitat type that does more to improve the biology than some heavy structural approach.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, but I was thinking more in terms of the upland habitat that the adults need.
Yeah.
You know, if they're nectar feeders and there are no flowers, you're not going to get the larvae and the nymphs in the stream.
Yeah, so that's on Megan's side with our other side of our ecology efforts. Now we've moved to terrestrial ecology within these riparian systems. So we have 2 restoration ecologists now, and they're collaborating with our landscape architects. And our study over the last 5 years or so has been to better understand the floristic quality of our riparian systems. And so the first thing, and this is something, Monica, I think that might go back to one of your thoughts too, we're trying to really push projects away from areas of high floristic quality. Where can you avoid impacts to good quality or better systems? And we rank them in excellent, good, fair, poor, similar to the Watershed rankings for benthics. We should never go into an excellent system unless there's an absolute need, because we cannot put it back. We can't put back most good systems either. So if it's ranked in a good quality rating when we do our analysis, we should try to avoid it. However, we can improve or replace fair or poor systems. So I think to your point, Jim, as we look at the system, there might be areas where we actually work on the floristic quality of the corridor as opposed to the channel characteristics in some cases, because that might provide those life cycle benefits and associated water quality benefits for soil processes and other things that we do need in that system. So I think that's a really good point, that this project will try to look at the whole system on how we can improve the system so that it will ultimately provide benthic improvements too. And there has been also research that as you degrade your floristic quality in these corridors, the type of material that drops in the stream, so that's called a loxinous material, the food web is based on what falls in the stream primarily. And if you have poor quality vegetation and high amounts of non-native vegetation, it dramatically alters what can live in the stream, because it simply can't eat the non-native things often, and they don't provide the right nutrition. So if we can improve the floristic quality in some areas, we could actually have a potential improvement of the benthics just by putting the right leaves, sticks, and other debris in the stream.
It's really important that you get that natural diversity, and you need to be thinking about cuticles and decomposition time, because it only comes in the fall and it's got to last until next fall. And if you're not getting that the right kind of carbon input, it's not going to survive, and you're going to wind up into a starvation period, or a period where nothing can go because you don't have the basis of the food web.
Well, we're part of our studies too that will be tied into this. We initiated a research program with the University of Maryland a few years ago with Stephanie Yarwood's program, to looking at soil recovery and the markers you're looking for. Unfortunately, bacteria markers aren't predictive because bacteria persist in really bad soils, so even highly urban systems. But there is significant work that's going forward with the occurrence, the ratio of certain fungal types for mycorrhizal fungi, and also the abundance of those fungal types. And degraded systems have lower fungal abundance and diversity, and systems that get restored with native plants, because the non-native plants don't host the fungal networks either. So that's one piece. Another piece is woody debris, complex woody debris. And you and Jerry will really appreciate this. We obviously continue to look at issues of deer impact and how we can improve floristic quality in urban systems with overabundance of white-tailed deer. So all these things are issues we're trying to continue to push. How can we recover them with all these stressors?
I just wanted to mention that, when we think about the role of the Soil and Water Conservation District in a project like this, and if we went back to the map of just this small sub watershed, I've not actually run the numbers yet, Charles, but there looks to be, a couple thousand residential units, or landscapes, plus the schools, plus some modest commercial areas, industrial areas, but it's predominantly parkland and the medium density residential. And so that's a lot of work. But what I look forward to as part of this process, and I kind of referred to it just a little bit ago when we were reviewing the VCAP documents, is that this presents an opportunity to take a look at the watershed at least on a smaller scale and say, where could we put, what different kinds of projects might we need to put in particular places to reduce runoff, for example? Where do we need to be making more of a point for a water quality benefit? Is that right next to the stream? Is that where we would be much more beneficial for conservation landscaping practices, as an example? Do we want to be encouraging some other kinds of things? So there's some of that pre-planning that we can do in order to help to target a few of our approaches for a watershed like this. And I look forward to running some of those different kinds of, working together to run some of those different kinds of analyses, because I think that's going to be really important as we, move into thinking about these projects, not just from reducing nitrogen and phosphorus and sediment, but also providing that ecological lift that we're also looking for.
Yeah.
The fluoride perspective is a whole nother component, and intercepting that water and finding different interesting and unique ways of being able to, treat some of the chloride laden water, particularly during the winter months. Those are some interesting techniques that are out there too. That would be kind of tough to do at a residential scale, but that's what makes this fun. That's what makes this kind of work fun, is we get to be creative and thoughtful about approaches and think about what can be done naturally, but then also where, some of those engineered practices may be necessary. So I am excited and appreciate, Charles, your engaging the district in this work. I think that, I can say that, I think this is a great fit for some of the work that we're doing and finding those complementary efforts and really thinking of it from a holistic scale. And there's a whole lot of wonderful work that is being done by stormwater planning, and I've had some conversations with some of the ecologists on the different metrics that could be used to determine, success in these kinds of projects and at this scale. So this is just the beginning, I think, of some really great conversations. And Charles, I hope that we can continue to bring some of this information back to the TRC as we move through some of the milestones and some of the processes. And, this is a great group of thoughtful folks who can help to inform, some of those, some ideas as well.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go, Adrian.
Go ahead.
No,
Charles.
I'm just gonna turn it back over to you unless there's any other questions.
Yes, I think that this was very, very great and a great collaborative project. I really appreciate you describing it and taking the time to go through it. What more do we need to go forward with, before the committee here, Laura? I think that we've reached the end of our agenda. Are we having a meeting in August?
I guess that's a question. I want to ask Willie and Christina if she's Christina's still on. Oh yes, there she is. Just to see if there's anything that we may be aware of that would need to be come before the committee. Just recognizing that we don't typically have a board meeting in August. So between now and the next opportunity for approvals would be September. Is there anything that needs to come before the TRC in August? And just a reminder, you may need to take yourself off of mute.
Nothing from my end. I will say that it will likely be a heavy cap load in September. I've been talking to a couple of contractors and they plan to wrap up some projects that they've been working on to hopefully submit in September. So you guys can anticipate that for the fall.
And those would be reimbursements, Christina, or would those be new applications?
Those would be new applications. I also anticipate some more VCAP people to wrap up. We do have some CAP reimbursements that will likely come in between now and August. But a lot of people, well, I guess you and I can talk about, getting the reimbursements. I encourage people to always get reimbursements to me before July because I know we don't have an August meeting and I hate for people to be waiting on a large sum of money for a long time, but just kind of how it played out with a couple of people. So we can talk about that, I guess, on like what the best game plan for that is.
Laura, from my perspective, I know that I'll have some conservation plans. But the important thing there is that I have one or two that may be time sensitive, because one would be a conservation plan for a community garden that's being applied for, and one of the key components is to have a conservation plan. But I believe, as in the past, we probably would be able to put some conditions in place where the TRC may be able to review and tentatively approve or recommend approval so we can move forward with those time-sensitive issues. The second is the potential cost share, which I'm sure you on top of your email, Laura, you will see that I'm working closely with the May properties. And we have a pending meeting tomorrow where rather than try to compress 3 potential cost shares about the same time, I'm trying to see if I can handle them one at a time, expedite them and get them over and done with. At tomorrow's meeting, we would hopefully get a final confirmation from the property owners to make that move. And in which case, the TRC may not have to go through it again, but the board would have to approve an estimated cost for that, so we can use that to request bid for construction of the fencing. But those are just the 2 time-sensitive things that I'm sure will come up by the next couple of weeks, which we should be in line for our August TRC and or board meeting.
So it sounds like we would need to have a TRC meeting on August 18th, and we could keep it at 10 o'clock just to do a review of definitely the soil and water quality conservation plans and potential cost share project. So I guess if we can tentatively plan on meeting on August 18th, and then certainly if anything comes up before then, we can always cancel the meeting. So does that sound okay?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, by me.
Good for me too.
Okay. So Laura, do I need to close the meeting? A special wording.
There's no special wording. You can just go ahead and adjourn. You just say the time in which the meeting is adjourned, and then we will.
Okay, well, our meeting is adjourned. It's about 12:01 according to my computer. And John, we got you out with a little bit 1 minute over, so hopefully you'll be all right.
Adrian,
Okay,
Adrian,
yes.
This is Jerry. Could you stay on a minute? I got a question, or I'll give you a call on the phone. I got a question about contractors who can do invasives management.
Sure.
Take care, you guys.
Thanks, Charles.
To listen to that too.
Thanks very
Okay.
much. Also, just wanted to say thanks again to Christina. It's been a lot of fun. Hope you enjoyed your last TRC meeting.